Hello, Lindy.
Hi, Ron.
How are you?
The better for seeing you.
Well, I'd like to say that's probably the same for me as well. You first spoilt me with your presence, I think, at the Cossack Art Award 2013? 2012?
If you say it's 2013, sure it is.
So, yeah, about almost 10 years ago. Yeah. I think the first thing I remember was trying to look you up, actually, because I'd heard that this artist was coming out as a judge, and this person's name was Lindy Lee, and I'd not heard of Lindy Lee. Everybody else had, of course. They'd invited you out, but I was just the pleb that was in the space helping artists and judges meet. So I looked you up, and the first thing I noticed was you liked poking holes in work, and that's how I came to actually first make myself aware of you. And then you arrived. You got the VIP tour with Rio Tinto, I think, at the time. And then you got the Ron Bradfield tour. How was your sense of the Shire of Roebourne? I mean, that would have been the first time you'd been in a place like that, I was imagining.
You know, it was only a brief time, and it was a profound time.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference. It's really wonderful that we have Welcome to Country to celebrate, official events, and there's that acknowledgement. And, we'd been doing that for a little while by 2013. And it all sounded okay and, well meant. But it wasn't until I got to the Pilbara that I actually understood what country meant, what country felt like, and the importance of... I just remember being almost moved to tears by the vastness of that blue sky meeting that red earth, and actually how sacred that was. And I'm actually tearing up right now, just thinking of that. And also, if I might say so, the deep integrity of the Indigenous people. It's just this, like, I know, apart from all the complexities and stuff, I was almost overwhelmed and touched by the women, and just I can't explain it. It was the genuineness, sincerity, openness. There was a kind of truth in their being, in your being, and. To be honest, I very rarely encountered that. You encountered that with the occasional individual, but to come to this place where the landscape, the vastness, everything about it is actually embodied in the people. And I don't know, it was really profound.
I think one of the things that we enjoyed lots of conversations. We enjoyed the irony of being able to have some of the meals that we had in a place that lots of other people weren't getting that kind of meal. It was an occupied land of the mining industry occupying space in the way that it did, and the local people, the Ngunnawal and Yindyawarra people, trying to hold their space by sheer persistence.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
We spoke about those amazing women. And I got to introduce you to quite a few.
That's right.
And they all told me off and made me make them tea, which is pretty normal. But I heard you speaking last night at the VIP event about your mother, and the way that you're referring to your mother, and the sheer notion of the depth of intergenerational trauma and people's want to survive, move through, persist, despite all of that impacting upon them. With what sometimes from the outside can look like a simple thing by way of resilience, but it's an incredibly deep thing.
Yeah, so, I guess it might be that I responded so strongly to the women of the Pilbara on account of my mum.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm often quite light-hearted when I speak about her, and but what she's So the intergenerational trauma I'm talking about is the trauma of initially of war, the Second World War, of Japanese invasion, and then the revolution, the struggle, the poverty. And I joke about my mum's capacity to become a gold trader when she was 19, and but that's an incredible thing for a young woman. There's all of that, and really deep pain inside Mum.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I remember taking, my sister and I took her to see the Joy Luck Club, which is this film about Chinese and the trauma of that time, of Japanese invasion. And my sister and I are sobbing our eyes out, and Mum's just sitting there. And and later we just said, well, how was that, Mum? And she just said, oh, that's sad, but nothing like, what they actually went through. So, if I can get personal about it, it's like, it's nothing to be compared to what the Indigenous of Australia have had to cope with. But what, I guess, Mum, it prepares you to be open to that trauma, to the trauma in others as well. So I just remember, it's so deep, I can barely articulate it. All right, so Mum particularly went through a lot of stuff. Japanese invasion, the threat of sexual violence, all of these things. Eventually she cycles, she finds, my dad leaves to come to Australia because there's nothing else, but a white Australia policy says, you can come, but your wife and your 2 children, absolutely no way. So there's something very inhumane about that. And then, to be separated from your partner, in that photograph of, she's 6 months pregnant, I cannot imagine what that would be like, to say goodbye when you're also living in such great uncertainty. The courage of Mum to forge a letter that says, to get her across the border from China into Hong Kong. The sheer wickedness of her getting enough gold inside a suitcase to transport it. And she actually brought some of that gold to Australia, apparently. The fact that she comes to Australia, she can't speak English, and is not allowed to go to English school. So, it's all those sorts of things. Everything is against her. And she becomes pregnant with me, and then she finds out her mother has been incarcerated in China. And my Mum's mum dies around the time I was born. And she died, my grandmother died because she was released from prison, but she was pariah. She was nobody was allowed to go to her. So she was exiled, basically. And so apparently she became sick. Nobody was allowed to tend to her, and she died. And incredibly sadly, only later does Mum find out that one of her cousins went to bury her mother, And then, there are just all of these. Now, these are just, in some ways, small human stories. But the but some, like my sister and I sort of joke, but we're not really joking. Similar things happen around my sister's pregnancy about other family members and stuff. So the other thing about Mum is that she never talked about it, okay? Because whether it's a shame about it, because there's that aspect, there's also got to leave it behind, The only way to get through this is not to dwell, but to get on with it. But I think also in periods of my life I could sense Mum's grief. When I talk ever about it, it's always about her upness and her resilience. But there were these times where she was just processing so much pain and grief. And so that intergenerational trauma, okay, I had my own stuff around being Chinese and the odd racist remark that gets chucked at you and you have to wear and you internalise. Again, we internalise these values and we think this is what we are. We're not. And it takes enormous amount of work to cut those opinions out of your existence and to become true. I'm rambling, but it's just that Mum had this great capacity to be able to do that. But she didn't talk about her stuff. But does it make sense that when these things aren't talked about, or even if they are, some aspects of the next generation will have absorbed that trauma and that pain, and unknowingly it is your job to actually heal that.
Yep.
And that's really, really important. So my sister and I kind of joke, but that we became the sponges for everybody's pain and discomfort, and that our job was actually to witness that pain. So this is what I mean about the intergenerational trauma. Absolutely. It's not just because something bad happens. It's the way things get bottled up and the ripple effect of that bottling up, which is toxic, blah, blah, blah. And then all of that inevitably filters down to the next generation. And if that generation doesn't handle it, work with it, heal it, then it gets passed down and passed down. And this is exactly what is happening with so many people, in our world today.
It certainly was very much what we saw, was so evident in the Shire of Roebourne, in Roebourne town itself.
Yeah.
And we're watching some of the most amazing women walk and talk and stand proud on country, despite everything, physical, I guess, to a degree, being taken and managed for them.
I'm just having this really, really wonderful flash of a number of the women I met, and the impression I get is their uprightness.
Yeah, very much.
So it's just, does it sound too, so their uprightness and the connection between earth and heaven, it was that connection was embodied in the way these women stood and walked in the world. That's, it's like, it was really moving, and
it's very much in line with the nature of you saying holding up the sky. Yeah. Whereas for most Aboriginal people, my mob as well too, that whole sense of, in order to be able to be a part of that, it's putting your feet on the ground and letting yourself exist in what this whole timeline, whole world gives us. That sense of anchoring yourself
on this.
Because then you can do that. Yeah. And the sense of those ladies standing tall despite everything physically around them being something that seems to I don't know, pass. They're still on their ground.
That's
with
right.
their feet down.
That's right.
And they're still holding up.
Yeah. And that's just the amazing integrity. Yeah. And I remember I went on, it was an archaeological tour or something, and the guide was well-meaning enough, okay, and I just have to sort of capture this. He said, so we were looking at some rock art, and that was great. And then he said something like, most of you have probably come to this part of country to look at the art. It's not, there's not so much art here, but there's kind of spiritual stuff going on as well. And I that night I had to kind of politely correct him. I said something like, it's not that the art and the spirit are separate. Yeah. That art is because spirit is there. And that is, again, that was another aspect of going to the Pilbara, which it just, it really opened that up.
It really set feet down,
Spirit is here, and that is why this is created. Yeah. So don't you dare separate them, young man.
I remember you having that conversation. It was like trying to sit in the corner and not laugh too loudly as you sort of took that person to task.
Well, and if and if I look back on that period too, the thing that I've taken away, which might seem like a small thing, but it's not really, is the horizon.
Yeah.
And so I now live near Byron Bay, and I realise now, and it's something that's perhaps always been there, but it was certainly crystallised in that experience at the Pilbara, and has grown. And so wherever I live, I have to be able to see the horizon. I have to see the connection between earth and heaven.
Yes.
And I am very unhappy and uncentered if I can't see that. Which is when I go to places like New York, which is supposed to be all glamorous, and it's like, I have claustrophobia because it's all vertical, you know, and it's all about the ego self. It's all about me, 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 me. But once you have that horizon, you know that what you are or what you think has to travel beyond the tiny ideas that you might have.
It's an utter immersion, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Like, I am between this and that. I am all of these things.
I am the distance between the stars and the earth. Yeah.
And that sort of lends itself nicely to your need to be in the water every morning.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. It's something very in immersion. Of course, what it means is that you let go of a separate identity.
Yeah.
And you know, as I've said often, we are wondrously individual, but our individuality is utterly dependent on everything around us.
Totally.
And to lose that notion that you are just this is really important. So that immersion in a country, that's what I was able to glimpse at.
Yeah, totally. I could see it. When you landed in that space, I could see you just suddenly just put your feet down and boom, it was done.
Yeah, I remember also just this. I had a friend who he's white, but he lived. It wasn't in the Pilbara, but it was somewhere else. But he became something of a shaman. But he came back to the city, and he was barefoot. All right, white guy, and it wasn't. It was kind of a little bit of a joke at the time, but he said, "No, you don't understand. My feet have to touch the ground."
Yeah.
And he came up, you know, I remembered what he said when I got to the Pilbara. You physically, skin to earth, have to touch the ground. Yeah.
Lindy, you have been an incredible influence to me in such a small amount of time. It was a pleasure to meet you up there. And it was a total pleasure to surprise you again here. And it's good to see you, mate.
Mate, love you heaps.